Usually when we set out to learn a new physical skill, there is a very comforting kind of mathematical logic to it.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
effort generally equals reward.
Yeah.
If you pedal a bicycle harder, you go faster. If you push a heavy door with more physical force, it swings open.
Yeah, it's Newtonian physics at its most basic and comforting. I mean,
That's
you
right.
apply an action and you get a proportionate logical reaction in the physical world.
Exactly. It's binary, it's clean, and most importantly, it's intuitive to our brains.
Mm.
But then you step onto a tennis court,
Oh, yeah.
and suddenly that deeply ingrained intuitive logic just entirely breaks down. So today we're taking a huge stack of biomechanics research, physics papers, and advanced coaching manuals to deconstruct the actual physics of racket sports.
Right, because it really is a different world out there.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to transform those incredibly frustrating on-court errors into real aha moments of, biomechanical understanding. We are going to look at the tactical geometry of tennis, and eventually we'll contrast it with the wildly different physics of badminton.
Which is a fascinating comparison, honestly.
It is, yeah. And to start us off, I want to look at one specific, highly coveted shot that drives learners absolutely crazy. We've all been there. You're trying to hit that heavy, dipping, pro-level topspin.
Oh, topspin.
The kind that clears the net safely and then just magically dives down into the corner of the court. You tell yourself, okay, I need to brush up in the back of this ball to create spin. So you swing up as hard as you can, brushing like crazy, and boom, you launch it straight over the back fence, past the baseline into the parking lot.
Yep.
And it feels like we're just brushing too much, right?
It absolutely feels that way to the player. But that sensation is perhaps the ultimate tennis illusion. I mean, it is the defining biomechanical trap of the entire sport.
Wait, an illusion?
Yeah, because the core issue there isn't that you are applying too much spin. In reality, generating too much topspin is, well, biologically almost impossible for anyone but a seasoned professional.
Okay, so then what's happening? Why is it going into the parking lot?
What is actually happening, the reason that ball is joining the space program instead of dipping into the court, is a combination of two fatal mechanical errors that happen in just a fraction of a second.
Okay.
It's an overly open racket face at the exact moment of contact and a swing path that is drastically too vertical. It completely lacks forward penetration.
Huh. So we're misdiagnosing the problem entirely. We think we're overspinning it, but really we're just scooping it.
Exactly. You're scooping it.
So let's break down the actual physics of this topspin launch,
Yeah.
because our sources highlight 4 specific causes for this mechanical breakdown. And I want to know exactly what is happening to the arm and the racket.
Right. Well, we can trace this to 4 distinct points of failure in the body's kinetic chain. So the first point of failure is the racket face angle during the initial drop.
The drop, like when you take the racket back.
Yeah, when you initiate a topspin swing, your racket head has to drop below the level of the incoming ball. That part most people know. But players tend to just let their wrist relax and the racket just sort of flops down loosely, which automatically rotates the strings toward the sky.
Oh, I see.
According to the biomechanical data we're looking at the lowest point of the drop, the racket face should actually be closed. It should be angled about 45 degrees toward the ground.
Wait, closed toward the ground during the drop, but we're trying to hit the ball up and over the net.
Right, and that's the counterintuitive part. You start closed because as you swing your arm forward and up to meet the ball, the natural rotation of your shoulder and your forearm will cause the racket face to naturally open up slightly.
Oh, okay.
The physics demand that at the absolute microsecond of contact, that racket face must be exactly vertical, like 90 degrees to the court, or even slightly closed, somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees.
Okay.
So if you start the drop with the racket already facing the sky, well, by the time you reach the ball, it's flared wide open. If it's tilted up even a fraction of a degree at impact, you're no longer brushing the back of the ball. You've turned your racket into a ramp.
A ramp. Wow. That is such a vivid way to picture it. You're just providing a ramp for an incoming 60-mile-an-hour projectile to launch off of.
Precisely. And that brings us directly to the second cause, which is what biomechanists call the vertical swing myth.
Okay, the vertical swing myth.
Yeah, players hear the word topspin, and their brain automatically translates that to swing straight up. They treat the racket like an elevator, just pulling straight to the top floor. But hitting with a pure 90-degree upward pull, it destroys what we call dwell time.
Dwell time, you mean like how long the ball physically stays on the strings?
That's it, exactly. When a tennis ball hits a racket, it doesn't just bounce off instantly like a marble hitting concrete. The ball actually flattens out. It flattens out like a pancake against the string bed for a few milliseconds.
Right, you see those slow motion videos where the ball just squishes?
Exactly, the squish.
Hmm.
If you are just swinging violently upward, the ball doesn't stay compressed on the strings long enough. It gets a tiny upward jolt of friction, but absolutely no forward momentum.
So it just pops up.
Right. To fix this, our sources highlight a fascinating metric. It's the golden ratio of a perfect topspin swing.
Oh, I love a good golden ratio. What's the breakdown?
The biomechanical ideal is exactly 70% forward penetration and 30% upward friction.
Wait, okay, that throws a wrench in my mental image of professional tennis. When I watch the pros on TV, their swings look incredibly violent and entirely vertical. I mean, they often finish the shot with the racket wrapped entirely around their neck or completely over their head.
Right.
That does not look like 70% forward to me.
Yeah, it's an optical illusion based on where the swing ends rather than where the actual work is done. That vertical finish over the shoulder is the inevitable result of the follow-through. It's not the contact zone itself. If you look at high-speed camera footage of the actual strike zone, their racket is pushing 30 to 40 centimeters straight through the ball, perfectly parallel to the court.
So they're just driving it straight ahead.
They are driving the ball forward. Only after that 40 centimeters of pure forward drive do the wrist and shoulder joints run out of room and naturally force the racket to wrap up and over the opposite shoulder.
Oh, wow, okay.
If you skip that forward drive, you have no depth, no power, and the ball just floats.
So instead of thinking of the racket as an elevator just pulling straight up, we should be visualizing something heavier, like a snowplow. A snowplow that has to push heavily forward through a dense snowdrift while simultaneously driving up a hill.
That is a phenomenal mental model. A heavy snowplow driving forward through the resistance of the snow and then curling the snow up and over the top. That perfectly encapsulates the 70-30 ratio.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, even if I have the perfect snowplow swing path and I've mastered keeping the racket face vertical, I feel like I still mess this up if I get jammed. Like if the ball is too close to my body, doesn't the entire mechanical structure of my arm just break down anyway?
You've just deduced the third major culprit for the topspin trap. It's late contact.
Oh.
Think about the anatomical structure of your arm. If you let the ball travel too deeply into your stance, meaning you are forced to hit it beside your hip or, worse, slightly behind your body, your wrist and forearm are anatomically forced to open up.
Because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Right. You literally cannot keep a vertical or closed racket face if your elbow is pinned against your ribs.
Yeah, if I just sit here in my chair right now and try to mimic hitting a ball slightly behind my right shoulder, my palm naturally rotates to face the ceiling. It's just how the bones and tendons are connected.
Right. To prevent that anatomical breakdown, contact must happen a full racket length in front of your lead foot. When you extend your arm out into that space in front of you, it naturally allows for forearm pronation.
Pronation being the inward rotation of the forearm.
Yes.
Like turning a doorknob.
Yes, exactly like turning a doorknob downward.
Yeah.
That inward rotation keeps the racket face vertical or slightly closed. It provides the structural integrity in your joints to apply that heavy forward snowplow pressure we just talked about.
Which brings us to the fourth cause from our research. And this one feels deeply psychological rather than just physical. It's the tendency to lean back.
Oh, it is entirely psychological. It's driven by our inherent human understanding of gravity. We see a 3-foot net in front of us, and we desperately want the ball to go up and over it.
Okay.
So subconsciously, the brain tells the body to shift its weight onto the back foot, and we tilt our torso backward to physically lift the ball over the obstacle.
But I'm guessing that tilting the spine ruins all that geometry we just fixed.
It destroys it. The moment you lean your spine backward, your arm and your racket face tilt backward right along with it. You instantly turn that vertical snowplow wall back into a tilted ramp, and once again, the ball launches into orbit.
Space program again.
Yep. The fix requires overriding your instincts. You have to bend your knees, lower your center of gravity, and transfer your body weight aggressively forward through the shot. You keep your head dead still, trusting the 30% upward friction to clear the net.
Man, this perfectly sets up something I want to explore deeper. Because we keep using these terms, open face, closed face, vertical face, to truly fix this topspin issue. And honestly, to understand any racket sport at a fundamental level, we really need a masterclass on what these spatial geometries actually mean. Because open and close aren't just arbitrary sports jargon thrown around by coaches.
Yeah.
They describe the racket's literal relationship with the physical environment, right?
They do. And the terminology is deeply rooted in spatial geometry. So let's establish a clear baseline for our listeners. Imagine you are standing straight up on the court, holding your racket straight out in front of you, pointing directly at the net. The strings are perfectly vertical, perpendicular to the ground.
Okay, I have that image locked in.
Now let's explore the open face. In the biomechanics and coaching world, we sometimes refer to this as the tray, like a waiter carrying a tray of drinks.
Right.
You rotate your wrist so the strings face the sky. Visually, the string bed is exposed to the heavens. Mechanically, an open face creates a high upward trajectory. Now, if you have a slightly open face, say just 5 to 15 degrees, and you pair it with a swing that goes from high to low, you create a slice or you hit a volley.
But if you open it too much,
Right. If you open it past 20 or 30 degrees while attempting to hit a low to high topspin shot, that is the exact mechanism that triggers the error our Chinese biomechanics sources call Qian Fei, which translates roughly to scooping and flying.
scooping and flying.
Yeah, you have turned the racket into a shovel and you are literally scooping the ball into the air.
So open literally means opening up to the sky, like catching rain in a bucket. And the opposite would be the closed face, shutting the book so the strings are facing the dirt.
Exactly. The closed face is what we call the shield. The strings are angled down toward the ground. Obviously, you cannot hit the ball squarely with a closed face on a flat linear trajectory because the ball would just drive straight down into the bottom of the net.
Right.
But when you combine a closed face with that aggressive low to high 70-30 swing we talked about, the strings brush heavily up the back and the top of the ball. This violent friction grips the felt, creating massive forward rotation, and that rotation is what triggers the Magnus effect.
Ah, the Magnus effect. The physics magic that makes modern baseline tennis physically possible.
Yeah.
We have to unpack how this actually works.
It is genuinely fascinating fluid dynamics. So as the tennis ball spins rapidly forward through the air, it drags a thin layer of air molecules along with it. This is called the boundary layer.
Because of the fuzz, right? The felt kind of grabs the air.
Exactly. The fuzz creates that drag. Because the top of the ball is spinning forward against the oncoming air, it creates a region of high air pressure on top of the ball. Conversely, the bottom of the ball is spinning backward with the oncoming air, which creates a region of low air pressure underneath.
And physics dictates that objects will always move from areas of high pressure to low pressure.
Exactly. The high pressure on top literally pushes down on the ball, forcing it to dive sharply downward, fighting the natural arc of gravity. It's what allows professional players to hit the ball with terrifying violence, aiming it 10 feet above the net, and still have it violently curve down to land perfectly inside the baseline.
That is incredible. And sandwiched right between the tray and the shield is the neutral or square face, the wall.
The wall. It's exactly 90 degrees to the ground. This is the geometry of pure physical efficiency. When the racket is perfectly vertical at contact, the collision force is entirely centered. There is minimum energy loss. This is the geometry you use for flat, driving shots where you want maximum raw speed, right? Crucially, as we discussed with the topspin strike zone, it is that split second of neutrality that provides the forward penetration for a heavy shot before the racket naturally closes over.
This geometric breakdown makes me wonder something. If an open face, the tray catching the rain, is the ultimate enemy of the topspin shot, and it completely ruins a baseline rally, when in the world should we use it?
Yeah.
Because you briefly mentioned that a slight open face is used for the slice. And the slice is such a beautiful, infuriating shot to play against. It just skids, stays low, and dies on the court. How do we take this geometry that causes so many errors and intentionally use it as a weapon?
The slice is an absolute masterclass in harnessing an open face correctly. The entire stroke is built on it. But the biomechanics of a slice are wildly different from topspin. Let's look at the actual mechanics. First, the swing path is completely reversed. It is a high to low forward push.
A push, not a chop. Because I feel like when a lot of amateur players hear high to low, they immediately imagine they're chopping wood with a heavy axe.
Oh, absolutely. And that wood chopper mentality is the most common and destructive mistake when learning the slice.
Really?
Yeah, let's think about the physics of a downward chop. If you chop straight down on the back of the tennis ball, one of two things happens. Either the ball gets pinched, loses all its forward momentum, and pops straight up in the air, or you just drill it straight into the net.
Ouch.
The feeling should not be a violent chop. It should be much smoother, almost like you were eating or absorbing the ball deeply into the strings first, and then deliberately pushing it down and forward through the court.
To accomplish that, I'm guessing my standard topspin grip isn't going to work.
Right.
How do you actually hold the racket to create that pushing sensation?
You have to shift to the continental grip. The easiest way to visualize this without seeing it is the hammer analogy. If you grab the racket exactly like you would hold a hammer to drive a nail into a wall with the edge of the frame, that's it. In technical coaching terms, if you look at the bottom of your racket handle, it's an octagon with 8 bevels. That natural hammer grip places the base knuckle of your index finger resting squarely on bevel number 2.
Okay, so we have the hammer grip, we have the open face. What happens next?
Once you have the grip, the secret to a professional slice is all in the wrist. The wrist must form a rigid L shape. The angle between the back of your hand and your forearm is locked into place. There is absolutely no flicking, breaking, or snapping allowed in a slice. None.
But why does it have to be so rigid? Like if I'm trying to finesse the ball over the net, wouldn't a loose wrist give me more touch?
It feels like it should, but the physics of the collision dictate otherwise. You are pushing forward with a slightly open racket face against a ball that might be coming at you at 60 or 70 miles an hour. If that wrist hinges or flicks even a millimeter upon impact, the sheer torque of the collision will violently flare the racket face open from 10 degrees to 45 degrees.
And suddenly I'm back to sweeping it into the sky.
Precisely. A floating slice that pops up for an easy opponent smash is usually caused by 3 things. Either the face was too open to begin with, the contact was late so your arms were compressed and couldn't push forward, or you flicked your wrist and the collision torque flared the racket open.
Wow.
The L shape locks the tendons in the forearm to withstand that collision. To hit a heavy biting slice, you prepare high, racket head up by your shoulder or ear with the face open about 45 to 60 degrees. As you swing forward and slightly down, the face squares up so that at the moment of contact way out in front of your lead foot, it's only open 5 to 10 degrees.
So it starts as a tray, but by the time it hits the ball, it's almost a vertical wall again, just slightly tilted back to create that underspin.
That's the exact mechanism. And the follow-through is equally crucial. The racket extends far out toward your target, while your non-hitting arm, so your left arm if you're a right-handed player, extends straight backward behind you like a wing.
Like a figure skater spreading their arms.
But why do we do that with the non-hitting arm? Is it just for balance?
It provides balance, yes, but more importantly, it acts as a massive biomechanical counterweight to lock the torso. It actively prevents your chest from opening up and facing the net.
Oh, I see.
The slice requires your body to stay completely sideways, closed off to the net, to maintain that straightforward penetration of the racket arm. If you pull that non-hitting arm open, your shoulders rotate, your racket pulls across your body instead of through the ball, and the slice loses all its kinetic energy and bite. This all sounds incredibly precise. Which leads me to ask, if the slice is this incredibly useful, skidding, low-bouncing weapon, why do we mostly only see it on the backhand side? I mean, 90% of the slices you see in any given match are backhands. Why isn't the forehand slice used more often?
It's a great question. You absolutely can hit a forehand slice, and when used correctly, it is a devastating, highly advanced tactical weapon, but it is much rarer, and that limitation comes down entirely to human anatomy.
How so? What's different about the forehand side?
Think about the joint structure of your shoulder and arm. When you hit a backhand slice, your arm is pulling away from your body's center mass. As you extend the arm outward, your shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints naturally lock out and stabilize. It's a very mechanically sound, stable motion to push away from yourself.
Right.
But on the forehand side, your arm is pushing across the front of your torso. Anatomically, the elbow wants to bend, the wrist wants to hinge inward. It is mechanically much, much harder to maintain that rigid L-shaped wrist and to keep the body closed, sideways to the net when your arm is swinging across your chest.
That makes total sense. The body just naturally wants to unravel, bend the elbow, and open the chest up to the net on a forehand. So given how mechanically difficult it is, when would a pro actually risk using a forehand slice?
Usually it's reserved for extreme defensive scenarios or for pure tactical deception.
Okay.
The defensive use case is the extreme squash shot on the run. You are on a full desperate sprint, pull way out wide into the doubles alley, completely stretched out. You literally don't have the physical time or the footing to stop, plant, and set up a full topspin kinetic chain.
Right, you're just trying to survive the point.
Exactly. So you just throw the racket out, Use the open face to buy yourself time and slice it back deep into the court so you can recover to the center. But offensively, it's used to violently change the pace of a rally.
How does that work?
Well, if you are in a heavy topspin baseline exchange, both players are backed up hitting heavy high-bouncing balls. Suddenly, you slip in a forehand slice. Because of the underspin, it lands short and barely bounces, forcing your opponent to halt their lateral movement, sprint straight forward, and bend incredibly low to dig it out. It just shatters their rhythm.
Oh, man, that's nasty.
It is. Furthermore, the preparation for a forehand slice is the exact identical mechanical setup for a drop shot. You show the opponent a big forehand setup, they instinctively back up to receive a deep ball, and at the last microsecond, you open the face, soften the wrist, and slice it incredibly short over the net. It's pure disguise.
Talking about the slice, the continental grip, the slightly open 5 to 15 degree racket face, the high to low forward push, the rigid wrist, it triggers a major connection for me. That sounds exactly like what happens when a player rushes the net and hits a volley. Are they fundamentally the same technique?
It's a brilliant observation, and biomechanically speaking, they are absolutely what we'd call close relatives. Our sources define a volley as essentially a highly compressed slice that you hit entirely in the air.
A compressed slice. I like that framing. So they share the same physical DNA.
Completely. They share the continental hammer grip. They both require that 5 to 15 degrees slightly open face to create the necessary underspin, and they both rely on a firm forward push rather than a long, sweeping topspin brush. If you have developed the foundational hand skills for a good slice, you already possess the mechanics for a good volley, and vice versa.
But obviously they aren't completely identical. I mean, you don't see players taking huge sweeping swings when they're standing 2 feet from the net. Plus, let me push back on the open face for a second. If I am standing at the net and a ball is blistered at me at 80 miles an hour, and I present a racket face that is tilted open like a tray, physics says that ball should ricochet straight up into the ceiling. How does a volley stay low?
That is the perfect question to highlight the crucial differences between the two shots. The reason the volley doesn't ricochet into the ceiling is due to the nature of the swing itself. It comes down to amplitude and energy absorption.
Okay, break that down.
Let's look at the differences, starting with timing. A slice is hit post-bounce, usually back near the baseline, giving you time to set up a large swing. A volley is hit mid-air, before the bounce, incredibly close to the net. Because of that proximity, your reaction time for a volley is a fraction of a second.
The ball is just on you instantly.
Exactly, which dictates everything about how you handle the collision. Let's talk about the wrist. In a slice, we talked about that stable L shape. It's firm, but it's part of a flowing, carving arm movement. In a volley, the wrist must be completely locked. Solid, unmoving. It is a brick wall.
A brick wall.
If there is any movement or flick of the wrist on a volley, the sheer incoming torque of an 80-mile-an-hour ball will either twist the racket right out of your hand or you'll spray the ball wide.
And what about the swing amplitude to prevent that ricochet you mentioned?
The amplitude is vastly compressed. A slice requires a big, ear-high backswing and a long, carving follow-through. A volley has near zero backswing. The racket head should almost never go behind the plane of your shoulders. You simply set the racket out in front of you.
Just hold it out there?
Yeah. And instead of swinging, you execute a forward punch or block, like catching a fast baseball in a heavy mitt, but pushing slightly forward at the moment of impact. That forward punch absorbs and redirects the vector energy of the incoming ball. It flattens the trajectory out, while the slight 5 to 15 degree open face provides just enough underspin to fight gravity and clear the net before the ball drops.
So if a volley is just a compact punch with absolutely no backswing, where does the actual power come from to hit it deep into the opponent's court?
You borrow it.
Borrow it.
The power in a volley comes almost entirely from the pace of the incoming ball. You act as a redirecting wall. But to add your own weight and penetration to the shot, you don't swing your arm, you use your legs. You initiate a forward step-in with your front foot at the exact microsecond of contact. You are driving your entire body weight into the ball through your legs, transferring linear momentum rather than relying on your arm.
This is a really illuminating way to look at it. We've covered the topspin trap, the mechanics of the slice, volleys, and how all these geometries interrelate. If we zoom out for a second and look at the whole picture, how do these all fit into the complete ecosystem of a tennis match? It feels like we had this massive toolbox of distinct shots, but there must be a foundational platform they all launch from. And from analyzing our source material, it seems that entire platform is built on footwork and stances.
It is the absolute bedrock of the sport. Before your racket ever touches the ball, the positioning of your feet dictates what is mechanically possible for your upper body to achieve.
So let's map out that ecosystem.
Sure, let's briefly map it out. You have serves, which can be flat, slice, or kick. You have returns, you have your grind strokes, the topspin, flat, and slice baseline drives we just discussed. You have net play, volleys, half volleys where you have to dig the ball out just 5 centimeters off the ground, and overhead smashes. And finally, you have specialty shots like drop shots and defensive lobs.
It's huge taxonomy of movement.
It is, but every single one of those ground strokes and returns relies entirely on the foundation of stances. And the two main pillars of stances are open and closed. And just like we discussed with the racket face, these terms describe physical geometry. Specifically, they describe how your pelvis and your chest are oriented in relation to the net.
Let's start with the closed stance. What exactly does that mean for the positioning of my feet?
In a closed stance, your lead foot steps heavily across your body toward the opposite sideline. So if you're hitting a right-handed forehand, your left foot steps across to the right. This effectively turns your torso entirely away from the net. You are showing your opponent your side profile, or even a bit of your back.
And what is the biomechanical advantage of tangling my legs up like that?
Linear momentum. The closed stance is entirely designed around a back-to-front weight shift. You load your mass on the back leg, and you drive your weight entirely forward onto the front leg as you swing. Crucially, stepping across your body mechanically locks your front hip in place.
Wait, locks the hip? That sounds like a flaw. Why would I want my hip immobilized?
Because for specific shots, it's perfect. When the hip is locked by that front leg, your lower body cannot rotate forward. That means all the kinetic energy you generate is forced to channel in a straight line down your shoulder and arm. This is absolutely essential for shots like the one-handed backhand and the slice. As we discussed, those shots require a long, stable, forward-penetrating swing path. If your body opens up or rotates during a slice, the racket pulls off the straight line. The closed stance physically enforces that stability by locking the rotation out of the equation.
Okay, so closed stance equals linear momentum, straight lines, and locked hips. Then we have the open stance. This is where my feet are completely parallel to the net, right? Like I'm standing at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change.
That's the exact setup. Your feet are parallel and your torso is completely exposed, facing straight toward the net.
Let me push back on this because it doesn't make sense to me. If the open stance means I am standing there facing the net with my chest, doesn't that mean I aren't turning my body? I thought the golden rule of every racket sport was turn your shoulders. If I'm just standing at a crosswalk facing forward, I literally cannot turn my shoulders without twisting my knees uncomfortably. How am I generating any power?
And here's the great aha moment of modern tennis biomechanics. The assumption that an open stance means you don't turn is entirely false. In fact, the open stance is specifically engineered to allow for the most violent, explosive rotation the human body can safely generate. It is entirely about angular momentum.
Walk me through the physics of this, because my brain is still stuck on the rigid crosswalk image.
Okay, you start with your feet parallel, facing the net, but you don't stand flat-footed and stiff. As the heavy ball approaches, you dynamically load all your body weight onto your outside leg. So for a right-handed forehand, you drop your center of gravity and compress all your weight onto a deeply bent right leg.
Okay, I'm squatting on the right leg.
Now here's where the mechanical magic happens.
Yeah.
You keep your feet planted, but you force your shoulders to turn back 90 to 100 degrees, showing your opponent your left shoulder blade.
But my feet haven't moved from the parallel position.
Your feet haven't moved. And your hips, because they are attached to those parallel legs, can physically only turn about 45 degrees. But your shoulders have turned a full 100 degrees.
Oh, wow. So your top half is completely disjointed from your bottom half. You are literally wringing your torso out like a wet towel.
That is the exact mechanism. You are creating a massive coiling tension in your core. The obliques and muscles of your torso are twisted like a heavy metal spring. You have completely decoupled the rotation of your upper body from your lower body.
So all that kinetic tension is just sitting there in the core, waiting
For the trigger. And the trigger happens when you push violently off the ground with that loaded right leg. As you drive your weight up, all that stored elastic energy in the core snaps back. The hips violently uncoil 180 degrees forward.
Right.
And because your front foot is out wide, because it isn't stepping across your body, blocking the hip, like in the closed stance, the hip is completely free to spin. Your entire body whips around like a top. This explosive angular momentum travels up the kinetic chain through the torso, into the shoulder, down the arm, and finally whips the racket head through the strike zone at terrifying speeds.
So that is how the pros generate that massive racket head speed required for the heavy, dipping topspin. They aren't just swinging their arm really hard. They are uncoiling their entire torso like a whip to generate angular velocity.
Precisely. The open stance unblocks the hips to allow for maximum rotational speed. You sacrifice the linear step-in weight transfer of the closed stance, but you gain a violent rotational velocity that makes the modern heavy topspin game mathematically possible.
This is a perfect segue, because all this talk of heavy kinetic chains, locking hips, wringing out the torso like a spring to manage these massive collision forces, it sounds incredibly demanding and rigid. Does this apply to all racket sports? Like, if I memorize these exact kinetic chains and walk onto a badminton court, am I going to dominate, or am I going to look completely ridiculous?
You are going to look very rigid, very slow, and frankly, you might actually end up injuring yourself.
Really?
Yeah, the biomechanics of badminton and tennis, while they might look vaguely similar from the stands, are dictated entirely by a massive fundamental divergence in equipment physics.
It all comes down to the gear.
It comes down to the sheer physics of mass and aerodynamics. Our sources validate your intuition here. Think about a badminton match. It has vastly more named techniques: drops, clears, smashes, net kills, reverse slices, tumbling net shots. The taxonomy is incredibly granular.
Right.
And the reason for that diversity is the weight disparity. A professional badminton racket and a shuttlecock combined weigh roughly 85 grams. They have virtually zero mass, which means they have virtually zero inertia.
85 grams. That is remarkably light. That's like the weight of a handful of paper clips.
Because the equipment is so light, you can manipulate the racket using incredibly fast micro-movements. Fingers, wrist snaps, quick forearm flashes. You are operating in a 3D aerial space, making split-second delicate adjustments without needing to overcome heavy inertia.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Now, compare that to tennis. A modern tennis racket and ball combined weigh 350 grams or more.
Almost half a kilo flying at you.
And when a 350-gram systemic mass collides with a dense rubber ball coming at you at 80 miles an hour, the collision force is massive. You must rely on the large muscle groups, the legs, the hips, the core, the shoulders, to absorb that force and generate outward power. That is why the kinetic chain is so rigid.
Because if you don't use those big muscles,
if you try to use a badminton-style wrist flick to hit a heavy tennis topspin shot, the sheer mass of the tennis ball will completely overpower the small tendons in your wrist. The ball will likely just hit the net, and your wrist will sustain an immediate sprain or tear from the torque.
that makes so much sense. So in tennis, the wrist is essentially just a firm hinge that transfers power generated by the body. But in badminton, the wrist and the fingers are the primary weapon.
Exactly. And this massive weight difference creates what I call the stance paradox between the two sports.
The stance paradox. I'm very intrigued. Walk me through it.
Let's look at the rear court in badminton, where players hit those massive leaping smashes or deep clears. Players use a sideways preparation that looks remarkably similar to a tennis closed stance. They turn their body completely sideways to maximize the pullback of the racket arm.
Right, but we just established that the closed stance mechanically locks the hips and prevents forward rotation. How do badminton players generate explosive rotational power for a smash if their hips are locked by their stance?
Because they sever their connection to the ground, they cheat gravity by jumping. In a tennis closed stance, your feet are planted on the ground, so the front leg physically blocks the hip from rotating. But in badminton, players leap high into the air before they swing. Once you are airborne, your feet aren't anchored to anything. There is no hip block. In the air, they perform what's called a scissor kick, rapidly swapping their feet backward and forward.
Wow.
This allows the hips to achieve a full 180-degree violent rotation in midair, channeling all that rotational power into a devastating overhead smash, all while having the massive pullback of a closed stance.
That is incredibly acrobatic. So they get the pullback benefits of a closed stance, but they manufacture the rotational freedom of an open stance because they aren't touching the floor.
Exactly. Now contrast that airborne violence with the mid and front court in badminton. Here, players almost exclusively use an extreme wide open stance, squatting very low, chest completely facing the net, racket held up high in front of them.
Why so wide and open? Is it the coiling mechanism again? Are they trying to wring out their torso like a wet towel?
No, in this specific case, it's entirely about survival, aerodynamics, and reaction time. The aerodynamics of a shuttlecock are fascinating. It's essentially a cone of feathers.
Right.
The moment it is struck, it experiences massive aerodynamic drag, but initially it is incredibly fast. In a professional badminton match, a smash from the rear court can leave the racket at over 400 kilometers per hour.
400 kilometers per hour. That's faster than a Formula One car on a straightaway.
It is the fastest recorded projectile in all of sports. Because of that insane initial speed, the shuttlecock reaches the defender in roughly 0.2 seconds. You physically do not have the time to turn your shoulders, step across your body into a closed stance, or coil your hips.
You just have to react.
You have to stay completely square to the net, perform a rapid split step, and rely purely on the lightning-fast reflexes of your forearm and fingers to intercept the bird before it hits the floor.
So if we synthesize this whole journey we've been on, badminton is essentially a game of 3D airborne deception. It's fingertip magic, rapid micro-adjustments, and managing unbelievable aerodynamic speeds with gear that has zero mass. While tennis is a 2D baseline war. It's about rigid, heavy kinetic chains, managing massive collision forces, and utilizing fluid dynamics like the Magnus effect to manipulate a heavy rubber ball.
That is a perfect encapsulation. They exist in two distinct physical universes, dictated almost entirely by the mass and aerodynamics of the objects in play.
This has been absolutely fascinating. We've gone from diagnosing the pure frustration of the floating topspin, checking the geometry of that racket face, and realizing we need to push the heavy snowplow forward, not just pull the elevator up.
Right.
We unlocked the mechanics of the slice, turning the open face from an error-causing enemy into a skidding, low-bouncing tactical weapon. We saw how the volley is just its compressed high-speed cousin, relying on a locked wrist to absorb impact torque. We completely reframed how stances work, realizing that the open stance isn't lazy, it's actually a coiled spring waiting to unleash massive angular momentum. And finally, comparing the heavy, rigid physics of tennis to the lightweight, lightning-fast acrobatics of badminton.
It really highlights how deeply our bodies must adapt to the physical tools we use to play these games. Which actually leads me to a provocative thought, something we haven't touched on, but that this entire discussion naturally points toward.
Ooh, I always love a good thought experiment. Lay it on me.
We've seen today how the exact weight of the ball and the racket completely dictates the biomechanics of the human body. The heavy tennis ball demands the rigid kinetic chain to prevent injury, while the incredibly light shuttlecock allows for that wrist-flicking magic.
Yeah.
But material science is advancing rapidly. We've gone from wood to heavy steel to carbon fiber to graphene. It leaves you wondering, if material science advances to the point where tennis rackets become incredibly, unbelievably light, say, the weight of a badminton racket, without losing any of their stiffness or ability to absorb collision force, how will the sport fundamentally change?
Oh, wow.
Will the strict, rigid kinetic chains of modern tennis eventually evolve? Will future tennis players look more like badminton players, using wrist-floating deceptive magic to hit massive topspin shots? How much of what we consider proper fundamental technique today is just a temporary hostage to the current weight of our gear?
Are we just biological hostages to the weight of our rackets? That is a brilliant question to end on. Imagine hitting a heavy topspin forehand with just a flick of the wrist. The disguise would be completely impossible for an opponent to read.
It would completely change the game.
Well, until that ultralight sci-fi future arrives, we are stuck with the physics we have today. So to all our listeners, the next time you step onto the court and you're trying to hit that beautiful dipping topspin, remember the snowplow. Remember the 70-30 ratio of forward penetration to upward friction. Drop that racket head so it's closed, square up the face at contact, push straight through the ball, and whatever you do, don't launch it over the fence into the parking lot. Have a great time experimenting with your kinetic chains, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.